The Counting Quest in Whispering Woods. Learn numbers 1, 5 for toddlers. The sun was stretching its warm, golden fingers through the branches of the Whispering Woods, painting dappled spots of light on the soft, mossy ground. In a particularly tall and wonderfully twisty old oak tree, in a nest made of the softest twigs and driest leaves, a little squirrel was just waking up. She stretched her tiny paws and gave a great big yawn. But as she blinked the sleep from her bright, curious eyes, she noticed something very strange. Something was missing. The little squirrel looked to the left of her nest. She looked to the right. She even peeked under her fluffy tail, but it was no use. Her mother was not there. Her father was not there. Her big brother, who usually snored a tiny whistling snore, was not there either. The little squirrel's nest felt very big and very, very quiet. A small feeling of worry began to wiggle in her tummy, a feeling like a little cold pebble. She was all alone. She crept to the edge of her nest and peered down. The ground looked a very long way down. The woods looked very wide. But that wiggly, worried feeling in her tummy was even bigger now. She knew she had to be brave. She had to find her family. So, taking a deep breath that made her little chest puff out, the little squirrel scrambled down the rough bark of the old oak tree, her tiny claws making a soft scritch, scratch, scritch sound all the way down. When her paws touched the cool, damp moss of the forest floor, she stopped to listen. The woods were full of sounds. There was the cheerful chirp-chirp of morning birds, the lazy buzzes of a bumblebee, and the gentle rustle-rustle of leaves in the breeze. But she could not hear the chitter-chatter of her squirrel family. She could not hear her brother cracking a morning acorn. She felt a small whimper rise in her throat, a feeling of being very small in a very big world. Just as a tear was about to tumble from her eye, a soft, shimmering light floated down right in front of her nose. It was a firefly, but this was no ordinary firefly. This firefly glowed with a gentle, silvery light, and it seemed to be blinking on and off in a very special pattern. It blinked once, then twice, then 3 times, then 4, then 5 times before starting all over again. The little squirrel watched, mesmerized. The silvery firefly didn't speak, of course, but it bobbed in the air as if to say, "Follow me." And so, with a new spark of hope, making her heart feel a little lighter, the little squirrel decided to follow the glowing, blinking guide. The firefly led her to the base of a giant, friendly-looking mushroom with bright red spots. There, nestled against the stem, was a smooth gray stone, and on the stone, 5 glowing dots had been painted with what looked like glowing pollen. They shimmered just like the firefly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dots. The little squirrel looked at the dots, then up at the firefly, who was now blinking excitedly. 1 blink, 2 blink, 3. The little squirrel wasn't sure what it meant. She reached out a tiny paw and gently tapped the stone. 1 tap, then another. Tap, 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 tap. She tapped 5 times, 1 for each glowing dot. And something magical happened. The 5 glowing dots on the stone suddenly swirled together and formed a shimmering arrow, pointing down a narrow path lined with blue flowers. The little squirrel gasped, a tiny sound of pure wonder. The firefly zipped joyfully around her head before zipping down the path. The quest had begun. The little squirrel's mission was clear. She had to follow the clues, and to do that, she had to learn to count. Can you count along with us? Can you help the little squirrel on her adventure? Let's get ready to count together. The path of blue flowers was soft under the little squirrel's paws. Up ahead, the silvery firefly was waiting, hovering next to the first big challenge. It was a babbling brook, but the water was flowing far too fast for a little squirrel to swim across. The only way across was a line of 5 round stepping stones that poked up from the rushing water. But oh dear, the stones were not ordinary stones. Each one had a number of tiny holes on its surface, and from each hole, a little jet of water squirted up into the air. It was a crossing of squirting stones. The little squirrel approached the first stone. It had 1 single hole and 1 single stream of water squirted up with a cheerful pfft sound. It was a tiny, playful squirt. The little squirrel hopped onto it easily. The water tickled her paws, but it was not scary. Now, can you see the next stone? The little squirrel looked. The second stone had 2 holes. 2 little streams of water squirted up in a rhythm. 1, 2. The little squirrel took a deep breath and jumped from the first stone to the second. The water sprinkled her nose and she let out a tiny giggle. But the third stone looked trickier. It had 3 holes. 3 streams of water shot up, one after the other. The pattern was faster. The little squirrel had to wait for the right moment. She watched the water squirt. 1, 2, 3. And on 3, she jumped. She landed safely on the third stone, her heart beating a happy rhythm of its own. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The fourth stone was even more exciting. 4 holes. The water squirted in a quick splashing pattern. The little squirrel had to be brave. She counted the squirts in her head, just like we're doing. 1, 2, 3, 4. And with a mighty leap for such a little squirrel, she jumped onto the fourth stone. The water made a splashy sound, but she was safe and sound. Now only 1 stone was left. The fifth and final stone had 5 holes. 5 powerful little streams squirting like a watery fountain. It looked so busy. The little squirrel felt a flicker of that worried feeling again. But then she remembered the counting. She watched the pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She took a giant leap and landed perfectly on the 5th stone, which then, because she had counted all 5 squirts correctly, stopped squirting completely, becoming a dry, safe stone. With one last hop, she reached the other side of the brook. She had done it. She had used counting to cross the squirting stones. She shook her little paws, flicking off the water droplets, and felt very proud. The silvery firefly glowed brightly, as if giving her a round of applause, before leading her further into the woods. The next part of the forest was darker, where the tall trees grew close together. The air smelled of damp earth and old leaves, and there, blocking the path completely, was the second challenge. It was a great big sleeping bear. The bear was enormous and fuzzy, and with every breath he took, a deep, rumbly snore echoed through the trees. Hoo-ha, Ruff! Hoo-ha, Ruff! The little squirrel froze. There was no way around him. His giant body took up the whole path. She didn't want to wake him up. That seemed like a very not good idea. But how could she get past? The silvery firefly zipped over to the bear's head and began to blink. 1 blink, 2 blinks, 3 blinks. It flew in a little circle and did it again. 1, 2, 3. The little squirrel watched carefully. Then she noticed something. The bear's mighty snore had a pattern too. It wasn't just one big snore. It was made of smaller rumbles. She crept a little closer, her heart going pit-a-pat. She listened very, very carefully. The bear's snore went like this. A deep rumble, then a higher huff, then a long whistling ruff. Rumble, huff, ruff. 1, 2, 3 sounds. The little squirrel's eyes grew wide. The snore had 3 parts. The firefly glowed encouragingly. The little squirrel knew she had to be very brave and very quiet. She had to time her steps perfectly with the 3 parts of the snore. She waited for the next big snore. Rumble. On the first rumble, when the sound was deepest and loudest, she took a quick, silent step forward, right past the bear's big paw. Huff. On the second huff, she took another step, her fluffy tail twitching with concentration. Ruff. On the third and final ruff, the long whistling one, she scurried 3 whole steps forward, right past the bear's nose. She didn't stop. She kept going, using the rhythm of the snore as her guide. Rumble, step, huff, step, ruff, scurry, scurry, scurry. She moved like a tiny shadow, perfectly in time with the sleeping bear's 3-part snore. And before she knew it, she was safely on the other side of the giant fuzzy obstacle. She had used counting again. She had counted the 3 parts of the snore to sneak past the sleeping bear. She let out a breath she didn't even know she was holding. The firefly zipped to her side, glowing with a proud, steady light. The little squirrel was feeling very clever now. Counting was powerful magic. The path began to slope upwards, and the trees started to thin out. The little squirrel could smell fresh air and something sweet. The firefly led her to the foot of a small, round hill, the third and final challenge. This was Sunbeam Hill, but it was a very special hill. The entire surface was covered in the most beautiful, colorful flowers she had ever seen. Red poppies, bluebells, yellow daisies, purple clover, and pink tulips. They grew in twisting, swirling patterns, and right at the very top of the hill, she could see it. Her home, the old oak tree. Her family must be there, but there was no path up the hill, only flowers. And then, a soft, musical voice seemed to whisper on the breeze. It was the hill itself, speaking in a tinkling, petal-soft voice. To find your way, the pattern know. Count the colors where you go. The little squirrel looked at the overwhelming sea of colors. How would she know where to go? The silvery firefly flew to the first flower right in front of her. It was a single, beautiful red poppy. It bobbed its head. 1 red flower. The little squirrel understood. She touched the red poppy with her nose. 1, A few steps ahead, two bright blue bells grew side by side. They nodded in the breeze. 1, 2 blue flowers. The little squirrel carefully stepped past them, counting them. Next, she saw a group of 3 cheerful yellow daisies, their faces turned to the sun. 1, 2, 3. She counted them, her voice a tiny whisper in the quiet air. After the daisies, she spotted a patch of 4 delicate purple clovers. 1, 2, 3, 4. She was getting closer to the top. And finally, right near the crest of the hill, was a magnificent circle of 5 pink tulips, their cups wide open. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The little squirrel counted each one, her excitement growing with every number. As she counted the 5th tulip, the circle of flowers seemed to glow and a clear path appeared, leading straight to the top of Sunbeam Hill. She had done it. She had followed the counting pattern. 1 red, 2 blue, 3 yellow, 4 purple, 5 pink. She scrambled up the last bit of the hill, her little legs tired but her heart bursting with joy. And there it was, the old oak tree. And there they were, her mother, her father, and her big brother. They were gathered around a feast of the biggest, shiniest acorns she had ever seen. They had been gathering a surprise breakfast for her all along. They turned and saw her, and their eyes lit up with love and relief. They chittered and chattered with happy excitement, nuzzling her and checking that she was okay. The little squirrel nuzzled them back, feeling the warm, fuzzy comfort of her family. She told them all about her amazing adventure, about the silvery firefly, the squirting stones, the snoring bear, and the colorful hill. She told them how counting had saved the day, over and over again. Her family listened with amazement and pride. Her big brother especially looked impressed. The little squirrel realized that her scary morning had turned into the most wonderful adventure. She wasn't a scared little squirrel anymore. She was a brave counting adventurer. She looked around for her silvery guide to say thank you, but the firefly was gone. However, right where it had been hovering, a single glowing acorn cap lay on the ground. It glowed softly with the number 5, then faded into a simple, ordinary acorn cap. The little squirrel picked it up and held it tightly. It was a reminder of her courage and her new wonderful skill. She was home, she was safe, she was loved, and she knew how to count to 5. Wasn't that a wonderful adventure? The little squirrel was so brave to keep going, even when she was scared. And she was so clever to learn how to count. Can you count to 5 with me one more time? Let's do it together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wonderful counting. What shall we learn about in our next adventure? Will we learn about all the wonderful shapes in the world? Or maybe we will learn about being a good friend. Join us next time on Wonder Learn to find out. 5. Moral core courage and perseverance in the face of a challenge.